Lovely. So welcome everyone. Welcome to History Bites, the Rapid Response Collecting Edition. My name is Dawn Owen and I'm the curator at Guelph Museums. I'm looking forward to our time together today. History Bites is a 1 hour long casual conversation during which we chat about the latest news, exhibitions, and other things happening at Guelph Museums. Launched officially, I guess, in November 2019. History Bites used to take place in person at the museum. So this is our first virtual History Bites. So bear with us and bear with me as we go through this sort of first experience together. Join us here on the third Wednesday of every month at noon to take part in the conversations. And we will get this conversation underway shortly, but first just a little bit of housekeeping. So as I said, this is our first virtual History Bites hosted on the WebEx platform. So this is a new experience for all of us. We'll do our best to support everyone on the call. If you have technical difficulties and you cannot resolve the issue on your own, please know that the session is being recorded and the recording will be made available on the museum's website and on our social platforms after the event is finished. It might take a couple of days for that to go live and to be circulated, but it will come and we will certainly get in touch with all of the registered participants after the fact too. So if you do have technical difficulties and can't, as I said, can't resolve them on your own, we will make sure that you have access to the recording after the fact. Everyone on the call is welcome to simply listen in or take part in the conversation. We're a small enough group today that everyone on the call is unmuted. And so it's up to you to either verbally take part, or you can use the chat window to send in questions and comments. Luke Stempian here at the museum will be monitoring the chat window, and so just encourage you to use that function if you have something you want to share in that way. And I'll also be inviting questions and comments throughout the session. So let's begin. As always, when we come together in conversation, we like to center our thoughts within an awareness and acknowledgement of the land. Guelph is situated on the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe peoples, specifically the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Through the Between the Lakes Purchase No. 3 Treaty of 1792, the Mississaugas of the Credit ceded to the British Crown over 3 million acres of land between Lakes Huron, Ontario, and Erie. Today, Guelph is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Guelph Museums commits to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. We must do more to learn, share, and support truth and healing. When we started the History Bites series, we spent some time in close conversation about the land, its history, and its peoples. We also talked about our present day responsibility to continue building our knowledge and relationships in preservation and protection of the land for our collective futures. And this is a commitment that informs all that we do at the museum and includes today's conversation. So today's History Bites session is called Rapid Response, Collecting Today for Tomorrow. And I guess we should just begin there. So what is rapid response collecting? And in a nutshell, rapid response collecting is a new collecting program by Guelph Museums. And I guess the best way to describe rapid response collecting is to say what it is not. Often, Catherine, was that you? Okay, I can hear a little bit of feedback, but that's okay. I'll just keep going. So rapid response collecting is really an active collecting program, and how that differs from what we've done in past is we've rather taken a passive collecting approach historically here at the museum. And what that looks like is that people will come to us either from, well, really from anywhere in the community, outside the community, and around the world. People will approach the museum with artifacts that they feel are historically significant, that have a relationship to the Guelph community and Guelph's history. And generally what happens is they'll let us know that they're interested in entering into a conversation with us about the placement of those objects within our collection here. And that will trigger a process that is sort of driven by our curatorial team at the museum, where we invite that conversation. We have an opportunity to learn about the history connected with the objects. We then enter into an analysis process and some more research, and then we bring all of that information to an acquisitions committee. And the committee looks at the object and all of the information and makes an informed decision about whether or not we would formally accession or collect that object into the collections here at the museum. And that's typically what we have done in past and what we continue to do. We certainly have an open door policy as it comes to people letting us know when they have interesting stories and objects that have historical significance. The difference with rapid response collecting is that it's an active collecting program whereby we we have put a call out into the community and the broader world and said, we're interested in hearing about this current historical moment. So what is happening today, what is impacting our lives as we live them. And rapid response collecting was really designed to be responsive in that way. The process for actually acquiring the object by the museum looks very much the same as I've already described, with the difference being that we're actively inviting people to think about how we might collect objects and images and other kinds of expressions that really reflect what's happening right now in our communities. And that is the biggest difference between what we have always done and what we continue to do and what the Rapid Response Collecting Program is designed to do in a unique way. I would say too that rapid response collecting is also could also be called contemporary collecting. So in that context, and in terms of the current events that are happening that we're all experiencing in interesting and unique and powerful ways, this program is really initiated to respond first and foremost to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we were looking for a way, when the pandemic first came upon us, to really connect meaningfully with our community and to think about it as historians do. What would happen, to pose the question, what would happen in 50 or 100 years or more if we were to try and build, for example, an exhibition that talked about this particular moment in Guelph's history, the world's history, frankly. And so we really devised this process out of that interest and that need to respond in that way. And we were really overwhelmed with the response, and we'll get into that a little later in our conversation, I'm sure. And then sort of what happened, what has happened and continues to happen is that, of course, other events and other things, other historical moments are also happening simultaneously with the pandemic. And so, for example, when the Black Lives Matter Solidarity March happened in Guelph and elsewhere around the world, in Guelph it took place on June 6, 2020, and was led by the Guelph Black Heritage Society. And there were literally thousands of people who either came to Guelph or live in Guelph and came out for the march to really declare themselves a part of that movement. And so we thought, we asked ourselves, could the rapid response collecting program flex to respond also to that historical moment? And so in partnership with the Guelph Black Heritage Society, we undertook that process. And so we're actively collecting now, both for looking for responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also specifically to the Black Lives Matter movement. And again, I think some of that, some specific show and tell will be included in this presentation today, and we'll be able to look at some of the images and objects that people have shared. So I've said a lot as the introduction to this conversation today, and I wanted to make space for any questions that might have been percolating away in your minds. And so would just open the floor to invite any questions from the group. Be happy to answer those now. So it seems, and actually, Luke, if I could ask you, do you have any questions that you've been collecting as we've gotten rolling here?
Yes, absolutely. So happy to make some space for folks in the chat to participate, but we've also received a few questions before the event today that we'll ask throughout the presentation. So yeah, the first question that I have here is what kind of objects are people offering to the museum through the Rapid Response Collecting Program?
I love this question. Thank you for that, Luke. Actually, I'm going to love all the questions, frankly. I love conversation, and that's why we do the things that we do, specifically with History Bites. So, you know, the best way for me to answer this question initially is really to differentiate between physical artifacts and born digital artifacts. Because we have seen with this rapid response program sort of an emergence of objects being offered to us that are, or what we would describe as born digital artifacts. So perhaps I'll start with the reverse, though, which is that, you know, typically what we have and what is represented in our collection of over 40,000 objects are, in fact, physical objects or physical artifacts, physical photographs, other documentation and, you know, paper-based artifacts as well. And those materials live in our collection storage rooms at the museum. They occupy physical space. They have an objecthood or objectness about them, so we can handle them in our hands carefully, of course. We can examine them. We can photograph them. We are very proud in the fact that most of our physical collection is digitally documented. So we do have a great repository of digital documentation of those physical objects, but nonetheless, they exist in a physical way. So rapid response collecting has certainly generated physical objects, and we are still interested in collecting those. But simultaneously, and I would venture to suggest that maybe equally, we are being offered submissions of born digital artifacts. And what that means is that the artifacts themselves really are digitally made or rendered. So it could be a digital photograph that has been submitted to us. It could be, for example, a meme that was created and circulated on social media platforms. It could be you know, it could be an audio or a video track that only exists as a digital file. And these examples really are starting, I think, you know, naturally over time, we will, outside of the rapid response collecting program, be offered born digital artifacts anyway. But this program, because it is about the here and now, because people are actively specifically in the context of COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, people are actively sort of creating expressions, documenting their experiences, and almost not exclusively, but often in digital ways. So really the kinds of objects we're getting through the rapid response collecting program are both physical, they exist in real space. Sometimes they're made, crafted by hand, sometimes they're commercially made objects. But then we also have a fair number of artifacts that are digital. And so we're also mobilizing around collecting those materials and sort of understanding those digital artifacts in a unique way that is different, say, for example, from how we digitally document a physical object that lives in the collection. So this is great and challenging for the museum team. And again, I'll be able to share some of those images with you today. But that's how I would sort of characterize the kinds of objects that we are being offered through this program.
That's great. Thanks, Dawn.
Super.
If anybody has any follow-up, I'll just give a quick peek here. I'm not seeing anything through the chat, but just so everyone knows, feel free to get in touch if you don't have a microphone. You can reach out through the chat, and I can relay your questions on to Dawn. So the next question that we have, which I think is probably going to be a pretty popular one, is could you share some examples, maybe from some of the early collecting that's come through the program, some of the examples of some of the artifacts and things the museum has collected so far?
Yes, excellent. I'm very happy to do that. And I think I agree with you. This is why everybody joined us today, is to kind of see the proof positive of what a process like this might look like. And, you know, if I may say, and being a member of the curatorial team here at the museum and a member of the acquisitions committee that gets the opportunity to not only be in close conversation with our community, but also to closely study these objects of history, it has been quite overwhelming, the response that we have had from the community at large. You know, we have had a very high number of submissions, which have resulted in, dare I say, well over 100 acquisitions that really reflect this time. I see, Luke, you're nodding at me, so that is a good estimation of the volume that we've received. And I'd love to spend a few minutes right now just sharing some of the stories and some of the objects with you. And I'm going to do my very best to model these objects on screen for you. And to make sure that you can see what some of them are. So you might recognize the object that I'm holding in front of me here. Again, this is my first time doing a digital show and tell. So I want to make sure that you can see the object as well as I can. And so what I'm holding in my hand at present is a handmade face mask. We'll all be very familiar with an object like this by now. This one is unique. It was contributed to the museum by Tyler McMullen, who is a Purelator courier driver and delivery person. And he made, or at least had to use a handmade mask at the beginning of the pandemic. He says between April and mid-July of this year, he wore this mask regularly until the company was really equipped to be able to provide a commercial mask branded with Purelator's logo. So, this is a really important object, an artifact of this moment that, it might feel ubiquitous and common to everybody out there because we're wearing masks every day and interacting with others through those masks. This is not the only mask that we've received or the only offer of a mask, and we're interested in sort of the breadth of what that might represent. It might be interesting, for example, to acquire one of the Purelator branded masks as part of this story. I don't know. I'm putting that question out there. We don't have one as yet, and of course, many companies are branding or creating mask, if you will, swag that is branded with their logos. And this is going to be an interesting evolution of this story. But if you can imagine 50 or 100 years down the road, what the opportunity might be to display an object like this in an exhibition that really expresses the experience of the day. I'm going to move on and attempt here to share my screen. Let's see if I can. Let's see. It's not allowing me to share my screen, Judy. Is there a function that I need to pay attention to?
I'm going to just check your permissions if you give me 1 second.
Yep, no problem. And while you're doing that, Judy, maybe I'll go on to the next physical object. That way folks can continue to see what we've collected, and then I can come back to the digital images that I'd like to share just by sharing my screen.
Could you try that again, Dawn, if you can share your screen?
Sure. Okay. It is not allowing me to do that. Oh, I see a sign that I'm now a presenter.
Try it again.
Okay, you can see my meeting notes there, I imagine. All right, excellent. Thank you, Judy, for that help. And I'm going to go here and open an image for you, trusting that everybody can see the image. And I'll try to open it as large as I can on my monitor. And you can see here that this is an image. You can deduce very likely that it was made by a child. And in fact, it was. And this was submitted by that child's parent. And now we have made the decision not to share that child's name just out of respect for them. And as a child, they're part of our vulnerable community. So their name has been masked in this digital reproduction of the physical object, which is a drawing on paper. And this object itself, as you can see, shows a depiction of a hand-drawn depiction of the coronavirus. That's what you can see on the one side of the drawing. And then there are a group of people next to it. Also, this child is in French immersion, so they have described their drawing below, and you can see some of the text there. I hope this is coming through clearly on your screens. And one of the reasons why we wanted to share this image is because that oftentimes we think about you know, some folks may think about whether or not an expression or of an experience created by a child or by somebody who isn't a quote unquote sort of recognized historical authority might not be that interesting to us, but in fact the very opposite is true. We are really keen to see expressions from really every member of our community. And of course, we learned about this particular image through the child's parents who were in dialogue with us at the museum. And we talked at length about what the image represented. The parent was very interested in the fact that their child made an image of the virus when the parent themselves couldn't remember actually showing the image of the virus to the child. So, sometimes what happens in our world, particularly in the present day when we have so many screens that are offering us information, is that we're not always aware of how our children are receiving information. And so this is proof positive in this drawing that this child had seen a depiction of the virus and was thinking about it and felt that they needed to express that in a drawing. And so we think this is a really powerful expression of the time. And so I'm really thrilled to be able to share that with you. I'm still sharing my screen, so I'm going to stop sharing and come back this way. Could I just get a check-in on everyone? Does everybody feel like that they can access the information well? Can see the images? I see a couple of thumbs up. Okay,
The screen share looks good.
Great, excellent. So I'd like to move on then. I'm going to put my glove back on. And I'd like to share with you the next object, which I'll just sort of hold as close as I can to the screen here. I'm just going to adjust my position. And what you can see in front of you is a really beautifully made bracelet or cuff by artist Andrew Goss. And he is a well-known metalsmith who, turned to his professional craft to really find a way to express his experiences of the COVID-19 moment. And I want to make sure that I'm giving you ample view of that. Hopefully there's not too much of a glare. So, and Andrew really, what he's done is he has he was interested in sort of depicting in a graphic way through etching on the surface of the cuff itself, a number of different things: eyes, mouth, noses, droplets, houses, the molecule, the coronavirus molecule itself, a mask, the phrases COVID-19, pandemic, PPE, stay home, coronavirus. It's all on there in a really, really fine etch. And you can see it's just an exquisite object. And so thrilled to be able to share it with you today. Again, there have been many forms of creative expression that have been offered to us, and some by professional artists like Andrew, and others by people who maybe wouldn't use those words to describe what they do creatively, but nonetheless turn to creative outlets in order to kind of, you know, to make sense of the time. And I think that, you know, I know for a fact that we are very interested in all forms of expressions. And so I really just want to encourage people not to, you know, fret too much about, you know, if they've made an artistic object they're interested in sharing with us, and maybe that object isn't a perfect object in their view, or maybe they are trying a new expressive medium for the first time. You don't have to be the best in the industry in that medium, but if your expression is earnest and a response, an authentic response to the COVID-19 pandemic, or really anything else that is happening in your life, you know, we're interested in knowing about that, and there's room and space for that conversation to take place. And that leads me to the next object, which I'll hold up. I'm gonna use two hands here, so I'm putting another glove on, because I just want to make sure that you can see this object. I'll back up just a little bit. Don't need to see my face necessarily. Everybody get a good sense of that? I'll come in a little closer. Try and share with you some of the details. And I'll have to put it down in order to tell you a little bit about it. So this object was offered to us by Frances Hammond, who has named this. It has a title. It's called Caged by COVID, and it is a painted plate inspired by the artist Piet Mondrian, painted in vibrant colors, as you saw, red, blue, yellow, and green, with outlines of hands representing Frances's kids and herself. And she says in quotations, "my roomies during quarantine." And I think that's certainly something that we can relate to, all of us, is that, you know, we were sequestered in our safe spaces for most of the last number of months, let's put it that way. And the people we were sequestered with became sort of our roommates during those times. So I'll give you another look at the object now that I've described it for you. And you can see again, it's quite interesting. It is a creative expression. It's very earnest and responsive, just like all of the objects have been. And yeah, happy to be able to share that with you also today. I have a couple of other things, because we could go on and on. We've just got so many awesome objects offered to us. So the next two objects were made by the same person and offered to us from her. Her name is Alison Dunkley. And the first object, I'll just hold it up for you here. This is a stress ball. And in fact, it does perform like a stress ball. You can squeeze it. It's also a crocheted coronavirus. And again, one of the interesting aspects about this object is that Alison is a healthcare worker and has been an essential responder during the COVID-19 pandemic. And she was, you know, had made one of these, and sort of, I'm going to squeeze it as I talk here. It's very comforting. She had made one of these and had it on her desk when she welcomed patients into the facility where she works. And she was just really surprised at how people responded to the object. In fact, they felt comforted by it. It was a small way for her to exercise a little bit of sort of that unique expression that she can do through crochet, and the fact that it sort of really connected with people in a very direct way. And so we were quite thrilled to be able to acquire this object as well. Allison has also made, and maybe I'll show it to you before I describe it. You might recognize or deduce what this object is. And, you know, of course, earlier on in the pandemic, we were all amazed at the fervor with which many people were purchasing toilet paper. And of course, there were toilet paper shortages, which were, I'm sure, dire for many folks. And we all lived through that. And one of Allison's ways of responding to that was to actually crochet a roll of quote unquote toilet paper. And that's what I've got in my hands here. But the really kind of remarkable thing is that it's an entirely functional object in that each sheet of toilet paper can be removed. They're just tied together, and actually it's made from a cotton material that can be used and washed. So whether or not, and this isn't the only version of this she's made. So she's made a number of them and shared them with family and friends. And, you know, we won't be using the object in the way that she describes here at the museum, but certainly in a private hands, they could be used in that way. They can be washed, laundered, just as you would any fabrics. And then if you so chose to tie them back together again. So we were, you know, we're charmed, very charmed by this object, but it also is sort of an eloquent way of reflecting that other side of the story, which is the reality around the sort of toilet paper TP crisis that we had at the beginning of the pandemic. And who knows, you know, we don't know, we're still in the midst of it. We're not sure how the world will turn. You know, there may be shortages again of this and other things that we depend on for our day-to-day comfort and health. And we thought, you know, we appreciate the humor, we appreciate the sort of humanity that this piece represents, but at the same time, it also helps us to tell that other side of the story. So I hope you enjoy that one as much as we all do here at the museum. I would like to also share with you some images which came, so all of the objects we've looked at so far have to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. But we also, you know, following the June Solidarity March, we also, of course, invited the community to respond to that particular historical moment. And of course, it is ongoing just as the pandemic is. So we're inviting people to continue to respond, but also to the Black Lives Matter movement, of course, which is a really important historical moment, but also is in reference to a much longer history and will continue on into the future. And we're just starting at this point to really bring in objects that are specific to that event. And they're coming in a little bit more slowly because we started later in the year in terms of that collecting process. And so I've selected 3 photographs, which I'll share with you in just a moment. The photographs are created by Kavya Yoganathan, and she has titled each of them. The first is Stay Focused, the second is Canadian Blood, and the third is Looking Up. Kavya is a professional photographer, so the quality of these images are really exceptional. And so what I'll do is I'll share my screen again. I'm going to do this in a slightly different way to last time. And let's see here, share. Okay. Now I'm just going to open these images. Oh, that's not the option that I wanted. Give me one moment here. Okay, so you can see that this is one of the images. This one in particular is called Stay Focused. And again, this is an example of both a born digital object or artifact, like I was describing earlier. And it is really just so beautifully crafted. And you can see just how powerful an image like this is in terms of reflecting the experience of that day. Kavya has given us a lot of information that she was intent on us understanding, and we will definitely be building that into our formal record so that we can honor her intent now and over time, and certainly as we move past this moment into future histories. The reality is part of the challenge of rapid response collecting is really to map those stories as well as the objects and the born digital artifacts will be mapped into the collection so that our future selves, so whomever should be the next or future curator of Guelph museums, will have ample access to both the images and the objects, but also the stories that come with them. So I'm going to show you another picture also by Kavya, another photograph. This is called Canadian Blood. And the third image that she offered to us is called Looking Up. And I would say that these are, you know, there's no doubt that these are exceptional images, but the what we've seen through the call out that is specifically in response to the Black Lives Matter movement is really this exceptionally thoughtful documentation of that event, that there was an awareness, I think, by most, or it may perhaps even all people who were present on that day, and those who were present in mind, if not physically, in the march, because, you know, not everybody could actually physically march on that day, but folks who really think and reflect on that moment, and for whom that was a pivotal moment in our local history that had a direct connection to a national and international narrative that was being performed out around the world. And really, the Rapid Response Collecting Program has given us this opportunity to collect images like this now, so that future forward, we can have an opportunity to really study and to share and extend the teachings that are imbued in images like this over time. So I'm going to close that out and stop sharing my screen. I can come back to you here. So those were the objects that I had prepared to show you today. We have so very many more objects that, that could have been selected, could have been shared today, and we will work towards a goal of having a more formalized or organized or frequent opportunity for people to really see the results of that process, and for our community to sort of come together and share in those experiences in meaningful ways. I don't have a specific date for, say, for example, an exhibition that will be coming, but we most certainly will be working towards that goal. And as soon as we know when that will happen, we'll definitely share that as broadly as we can. So that kind of concludes my show and tell portion of the conversation today. And again, I know I've been doing a lot of talking and a lot of showing, so wanted to give a chance for folks to respond. Comments are welcome, questions are welcome, and it will give you a moment to sort of do that. And if nobody has a burning question or comment, then maybe I'll go back to you, Luke, for one of our other questions that came in ahead of time.
Yeah, for sure, Dawn. Thanks for sharing those artifacts with us. I'll just let the group know too that we've got a few new attendees. A few people have joined us since the beginning of the chat. We've got Val, Kathy, and Donna on board. Great to have you all with us. And as Dawn mentioned, feel free to any questions, interrupt as you need or as things kind of come to mind. But you can also reach out to us through the text chat, and I can relay your question on to Dawn. But yeah, Dawn, thanks for sharing those artifacts. Great variety and some really nice stories to go along with the physical or the digital thing item, which is really nice. So I guess my next question here is more sort of nuts and bolts, and so it asks, how do people take part in rapid response collecting?
Yeah, so excellent and awesome question. Because as I've mentioned a couple of times, we are continuing, the rapid response collecting program is continuing. And it is available first and foremost through an online submission process. Now, this is a process that we created really at a time in the last number of months when we were not physically open to the community. We were working, all of us, from remote locations, and the building itself was closed. So when we launched Rapid Response Collecting, we launched it as an online submission process. What we learned after we did that was that we can do this all the time. And that it can actually be a core part of how we encourage submissions and acquisitions to the museum. Encourage and also control and organize that material as it comes in. So what folks who are interested in sort of learning more about that need to do is to go to our website, so guelphmuseums.ca. Go right to the main page. There is a scrolling header at the top of the page that one of which will say Rapid Response Collecting. If you click through on that header, you will land on a page that gives you all the information, much more information than what I've shared with you today in terms of the different ways in which you can contact the museum, let us know about the objects themselves. And I'm actually wondering, Luke, if you might be pulling up that page now and might be able to, I don't know if you can share your screen. Judy, is that possible for Luke to be able to share his screen?
Just 1 second.
So thanks for doing that on the fly.
Yeah, no problem. Perfect. Here we go. Yeah, so we're here at the main landing page of Guelph Museums. This is the header that Dawn was talking about, and I'm just going to scroll through here, promoting some other events. And here's Rapid Response Collecting, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And if we scroll down here, you'll see Rapid Response Collecting. And we have sort of two channels of Rapid Response Collecting, one for COVID-19 and a forum here, and then second forum for material related to the Black Lives Matter movement. Clicking either of those links will give you a little bit more information. I'll give you an example of some of the things that we've been thinking about adding to the collection. You could go ahead and say continue. And the form will sort of walk you through some questions. It starts with some nuts and bolts questions about contact information. But as you move forward, we'll ask you more about the items and even has the ability to upload, if you're thinking about submitting something that was born digital, a video file, image file, PDF, really can be whatever you're interested in. Dawn, I'll hand things back over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's great. We didn't plan that ahead of time, but thank you, Luke, for so much for being able to just on the fly there share the website and the portal for Rapid Response Collecting with our gathered group. You know, it's a very streamlined process. So I would encourage folks, if you're interested in going there, to not be daunted by the submission form. We've tried to keep the questions as simple and direct as possible. It really just is a way for us to sort of capture not only your information, but also the information related to the objects, be they physical or digital. In a concise way that tells us what we need to know so that it can start the whole process from an internal perspective, internal to the museum. You know, we meet monthly. I don't know if I said that earlier, but the acquisitions committee here at the museum meets monthly to look at submissions that have come in. Now, the rapid response collecting program, as I said, it's active, it's ongoing. We will soon, though, because we're coming toward the end of the calendar year, we will soon go into a phase where we're just very busily making sure that we have understood all we need to know and understand about the objects we've collected to date. That takes, I won't bore you with the details of what those processes entail, but it does require a lot of work on behalf of the team here at the museum to make sure that we have mapped those objects correctly, that we've understood the stories they tell, that we have spoken at length with the people who are making the submissions, and that we've mapped all of that knowledge into our collections database in a way that we can then share back to the broad community through our public collections portal. And so that just takes a bit of time. So the portal for rapid response collecting will not disappear. It will stay where it is, where Luke showed you it is on our website. But we will, after the end, I think October 1st is our timeline, if I'm not mistaken, and Luke's nodding at me, so that's good. I've remembered that correctly. As of October 1st, we won't be actively processing or responding or undertaking those analyses of the objects as they come in, but we will be tracking them. So what we don't want to do is sort of slow or limit the opportunity for members of the community to complete those submissions. Let us know what you've got, but we will sort of take a 2-month hiatus while we're still processing, or 3 months, I guess, hiatus while we're processing those objects that have come in already. And then come the new year, which will be upon us before we know it, we'll reopen the processes as well, so that we can start reaching back out to those people who have made submissions in the intervening time. But if you're burning to get an object into us really quickly, which we hope you are, I would just encourage you to make those submissions between now and the 1st of October, so that we can make sure to get back in touch with you in the short term. And that would give us the ability that when we meet as a committee in mid-October, we can actually, consider the objects that you've submitted. So there is some urgency if there's urgency on your end once after. So after the October 1st deadline, as I said, the portal remains open, and we'll continue to roll forward. But the reality is, it'll just be a collecting place for that content until we can circle back around again and sort of reopen our processes. So I hope that isn't too confusing for folks. I just wanted to make sure to plant that seed so that we had that collective awareness of just how things evolve once you hit send or submit on your submission. And I think I might have accidentally also answered the next question.
Yes, actually, you've answered my next question, which was, does rapid response collecting have an end date?
So the long and the short of that question is that no, it does not have an end date. Rapid response collecting, as I mentioned earlier in our dialogue today, is an ongoing process. It really is a way for us to encourage contemporary collecting, which is to say that objects that are being used, discovered, created, material expressions, immaterial or digital expressions that are being created in this moment in time that folks feel have historical significance. And so as time rolls on, the Rapid Response Collecting Program is really designed to be responsive to what is happening in the world around us. We are specifically very interested in Guelph's story. So, and by that I mean objects, be they physical or digital, that really help us to tell the story of this community in the midst of everything that is happening around us. So sometimes obviously both the major historical events that we have identified, the first one being the COVID-19 pandemic, the second one being the Black Lives Matter movement, both of those events don't suddenly end, right? They evolve, they grow, they change, and that sort of the significance of change in the context of these events is really also very interesting to us, and one of the reasons why we wanted to sort of capture that from a historical perspective right now. So rapid response collecting will roll forward. It will continue. We will find, I think, new and inventive ways to send the message out into the community to keep people connected with that opportunity. And that will all come. And we'll have probably another History Bites down the road, future forward, where we come back together in dialogue about rapid response collecting. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we will also have opportunities to basically show or display, perhaps in an exhibition context or other virtual venue, the results of that process. And my other goal is to actually involve the people who made the submissions, those who are willing to actually be a part of the dialogue as we share it publicly. So all of these things will unfold over time. And I just really want to encourage people to think of it in that way. So no end date, but a sooner than later time frame if you want us to look at your objects, within the next short while, that being October 1st. So I'm keeping an eye on our clock. We have a few minutes left in our session today, and I don't know if we have any comments or questions that I should be made aware of, or if everybody's just been peacefully listening.
Dawn, I haven't seen any questions come in through our chat function.
Okay.
Just to say to folks, if you, it is our first time testing out this platform, so if you are typing away and for some reason I'm not seeing your messages, feel free to reach out to us by email and just let us know that something went wrong, and we'll reply to your question, but I'm not seeing anything come through. And otherwise, we could open the floor if anybody's got a question and a microphone that they'd like to propose. We have a few minutes.
So I'll also say that if sometimes what happens to me when I'm a participant in an online dialogue, I think of my great question after the fact. And I think what we want to encourage is that if you do have something that you thought you'd like to share, or that you're just formulating a question that there isn't time for us to actually ask and answer in the context of the dialogue we're having now, then feel free to reach out to us at the museum. If you go to the staff contacts page, you can send those questions into me personally, and you can see my my name, my phone number, my email address. It's just dawn.owen@guelph.ca. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'll make sure to answer your question and to share it with the team here. We really want to keep all avenues of dialogue open, and really encourage folks to come to us really with any questions, also with concerns. We're learning this process as you are. We're living these moments as you are, and that kind of the simultaneity of that, or the events happening sort of all at the same time, sometimes makes it hard for us to ask a question that they're still thinking about. So, don't hesitate. We're here, we're listening, we're learning with you, and we're also experiencing these events at the same time. So there's a lot of reflection, there's a lot of coming together, there's a lot of conversation that has happened, that will continue to happen, both within the museum's team and also within the community at large. And we hope to bring those two things together as frequently as we can, as we're sort of building our awareness and our knowledge, historically speaking. So if we had a crystal ball, we would be able to see what our future selves are going to do with this material over the long lens of time. But for now, what we'll do is pay attention to the moment and really enjoy each other, and also be thoughtful and reflective as we learn together. So there's just a couple of minutes left in our time here, and I think I'll use that to say thank you and to invite you to join us into our next History Bites session. So as I mentioned at the outset of our conversation today, History Bites really launched in November of 2019, and it launched in person. When the pandemic came upon us, we halted the History Bites program for a number of months. This is our first return to History Bites in a virtual format. We will learn from this day and apply our knowledge to the next event, which is on Wednesday, October 21st. So History Bites happens on the third Wednesday of every month, officially starting now and going forward. The next event, as I just mentioned, is Wednesday, October 21st at noon. And that conversation will be focused on a new display that just opened at the museum called Her Story, Trailblazers of Guelph and Wellington County. And that conversation will include it'll be intergenerational. There will be lots of people involved in the dialogue itself, and it will really give us an opportunity to to bring together the physical installation that's on site at the museum, a virtual exhibition that lives outside of that context, and also the conversation that will happen here as part of History Bites. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you next time, and stay safe, be well. Thanks for joining us. Take care, everybody.